Afternoon. I am calling the August 3rd, 2020 Monday meeting of the Yakima School Board of Directors to order. The board is convened this afternoon for the purpose of approving the Yakima School District Reopening Plan and receiving public input on the Yakima School District 2020 to 2021 budget. We will now move on to roll call. Jennifer, roll call, please.
Donald Davis Jr.,
Present.
Graciela Villanueva,
Present.
Martha Rice,
Here.
Raymond Navarro Jr.,
Here.
Norm Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
Superintendent Green is also joining us for this meeting, and additional staff will be presenting to the board. Superintendent Green, can you please introduce members of your leadership team that are with us today?
Yes, thank you, Director Navarro. We have with us as cabinet members, Dr. Rob Darling, our Deputy Superintendent, Anthony Murrieta, our Assistant Superintendent of HR, Stacy Locke, our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Bob No, our Chief Legal Counsel. We have our Executive Director of Equity Partnerships and Student Engagement in Dr. Marcus Pimpleton. We also have our Chief Communications Officer in Kristen Fitterer, our Interim Executive Director of Finance in Becky Neeson. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, the board invites
Raymond?
you to, yes, Martha.
Could we ask folks to mute their phones or their computer mics, please?
Yes, it looks like there's quite a few attending, so we'll ask that you put your mics on mute at this time until we do have public comments. And we'll give you just a few moments to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, that's better. Next, the board invites everyone for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please rise, and Jennifer, can you please post the colors? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started with our meeting today, I just want to make a few comments. This virtual meeting is being held remotely per Governor Inslee's proclamation 20.28.8. So we're at version 0.8 now of the Open Public Meetings Act and Public Records Act, prohibiting public agencies from conducting meetings in person to curtail the spread of the COVID-19. As you may know, Governor Inslee has extended the waivers and the suspensions of Proclamation 20.8 until September 1st, 2020. I would like to thank the members of the community and from the district that are joining us today. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your interest in the district. We thank you for your ongoing support, especially during this current COVID-19 outbreak and public health emergency. The board will not be asking members of the community and the district to identify themselves. And this meeting, we will be allowing for public comments during the budget public hearing. In regards to online meeting guidelines, I would like to suggest that in order to facilitate this meeting, that members and speakers remember to pause or mute their mics after speaking to give others a cue that they can speak. Also, and thank you, Martha, for interrupting me. I encourage our board members to do that when there are times that I may not notice or I may miss something, I ask that our board members interrupt me as well as our superintendent, so I can recognize you and provide you the time that you need for any questions or comments. So with that, I want to thank everybody once again for being here today. It's great to see all those that are attending this meeting today. I think we might have broken a record. We're up to like 210 and it keeps moving up. So that's awesome to have you with us today. First on our agenda, we do have approvals, and we have approval of the resolution 09.19.20 District Reopening Plan. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to make any opening remarks regarding the opening plan and then kick this off for us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Navarro. I too am very pleased with the attendance today. It's so good to have so many people curious about what the reopening plans are. I want to commend the work of our steering committee, our work groups, our focus groups, both with our parents and students, and the surveys that we sent out and all of the input that we were able to gather from students, parents, staff, and principals. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not thank Dr. Darling for leading the work. And I know that he did not engage in this alone. He will be presenting to us today. And I'm thankful for his great leadership in making sure that we were considering so many different aspects during this difficult time. So without further ado, I will turn the time over to Dr. Darling.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Green. Let me share my screen. So we were tasked by OSPI to create a reopening schools plan for the 2020-2021 school year, and it was a pretty significant undertaking. So we were responsible for creating this plan, and then we had to present it to our school board to be approved, and then we had to do so 12 days prior to the opening of school, which for us is August 26th. So this plan has 3 major sections to it with 21 topic areas and about 100 plans, procedures, and protocols that we had to create. And then we will continue monitoring this throughout. If you see, and this link will be, this document will be provided on the school website later on. You'll see that we utilize the Gantt chart, and the Gantt chart is one of the ways that we use to monitor the process of our growth. This slide right here kind of gives you an idea. So if you see number 1, pre-planning, that's one of the topic areas. And underneath it, there was 7 or 8 different components just for that one topic area. So it was a pretty extensive undertaking that involved several hundred people, along with our work groups and steering committees and such. So I'm grateful for all the work that went into this. Some of the areas were marked 100% right away because we had already been working on this work prior to the COVID closure or during the COVID closure in the spring. Some of this work is nearly finished. We're just waiting for outside entities that we have no control over, such as the health district and OSPI and such. So some of the pre-planning efforts that went into creating this plan is we first formed a distance learning steering committee last spring. And this was comprised of staff members and a couple of students. And we went through a couple of processes where we kind of went through some visioning work around what does the ideal remote learning look like for students and staff and families. Try to identify some barriers and gaps that we need to address. And then this group was also tasked with coordinating and formulating our work groups. We ended up creating about 23 work groups, as specific as preschool, as elementary, special education, 9 through 12, PE. We covered every component of our Yakima School District that was included. And these work groups had almost 200 staff members and students. Some of them met 5 times, some of them met 7 times, kind of depending on how deep they needed to get into their work. And they were tasked with identifying, what can we deliver using our current system? What can we truly deliver online in an effective model for our students? What gaps and barriers do we have? And then what subgroups of students do we know that we will not be able to effectively serve if we're in an online model? And so that's how it started the planning phases for this work. And these groups were also tasked with creating an ideal weekly schedule for fully remote and for a partial in-person model. Also, Superintendent Green and I hosted a couple of parent focus groups, and we asked some principals to give us some parents who they thought had shared feedback, and over the course of this, as you can imagine, we received emails and responses from parents, either praising the work, but more often giving us suggestions on what we can do better. And we asked many of those parents to be part of these focus group. And so Superintendent Green and I sat down and we asked them a really easy question and a really hard question. First, we asked them what went well when we went fully remote. They had some responses of things that went well, things that they enjoyed that their teachers did or their schools did. The harder question to hear was what didn't go well. And that's where we did the majority of our learning and reflecting, for hearing from parents firsthand, what were the struggles and barriers they focused when we had a pivot to fully remote last spring, and what would they like to see us do better. And we used much of that feedback from them in creating the surveys that we've been sending out to families around online learning options and around online learning support and what parents will need to support for their own professional development and that of their students if we do continue to fully remote. We've sent out parent surveys with regarding to options about what would work best for them to have their students in school or partially in school. And then we've sent surveys to students, parents, staff, and principals regarding what support and training they would need. And then we're in the process of creating a scaffolded effort where if you need a basic support, an intermediate level, or you really are advanced and you want to do some more deeper dive into some of that content, some of those digital learning platforms, we're creating those type of experiences for anybody involved in the learning system, whether it be the student, staff, or parents. Some of the results from the surveys that came out was one of the first questions that we asked, we said, I would like Yakima School District to know that of today, during this pandemic, I prefer the following learning environment for my students. And about 45% of our families said, I want my students to learn 100% online from home until they have vaccinated against COVID-19. Roughly 34% said, I'm comfortable sending my child to school as long as you've taken precautions such as face coverings and such. 11% said, I'm comfortable having my child in person at school without social distancing or any safety precautions. And then 11% had a variety of different right-in answers. And this was very typical with what Superintendent Green and I heard in our parent focus groups. We had some parents that were very adamant saying, I'm not sending my child back to school until there was a vaccination. We had, on the other hand, parents saying, I want to send my child back to school today, and they don't need to wear a face mask or anything. And so we've been tasked with how do we balance the needs of our parents with safety of staff and students with the guidelines that are coming out from the state and the health department. So another survey that came out says, if YSD is in a distance learning status at any point in the school year, do you have planned supervision for your young children at home? And 50% of our parents said they have somebody that can monitor and watch the child at home. 17% said they do not. 21% said they will use older siblings, and 7% said they're going to use the older siblings to watch their younger siblings, which for us was kind of a key component to our scheduling that we're worried about, because we know that we can't expect middle school and high school kids who are watching their little brothers and sisters to be online and learning at the same time. It's a big challenge for them. And so we are being cognizant, and when we're creating our weekly lesson plans, and when teachers are going to be providing content, do we scaffold and stagger the time of day when we provide and expect attendance and assignments to be due when students to be online based on their grade levels to accommodate for those students who are, in essence, doing double duty during the day. They're being the adult, and during the evening, they have to switch back over to be the student. Does your student have internet access at home? 96% of our students, our parents surveyed, said they do. And 2% said they will by the first day of school, and 2% said no. And I would, a little bit later, we'll address some of the barriers that we've been working on with internet connectivity and one-to-one devices, and how we've been working diligently to close this gap. So basically, this plan covers three components. It covers what are we doing outside of the school building to keep students safe? What are we doing inside the school building to keep students safe? How are we going to deliver learning and how we're going to keep staff and students safe. And so one of the plans that we worked in even back in the spring was a plan for visiting incompletes for any middle school and high school students last year. And our teachers worked really diligently to reach as many students as we could, even those who were choosing to not engage as fully online as we had hoped them to, because we didn't want a significant number of incompletes to then have to burden those students to start this school year even further behind because they didn't finish what last year's school year learning was. Our summer learning activities, and when you get this information provided at the website, all of these items that are in blue, it'll take you to different documents that go into a lot more depth than what we're sharing here. But our summer learning activities, usually our summer school is in person. This year we were fully virtual, but we did extend some of them from 5 weeks to 8 weeks to allow students greater time with the content and more individualized instruction with the teachers that are there. We have to have a plan for universal screening. So how are we going to screen our students academically and social emotional needs, right? Whether we're online or in person? And part of our plan we needed to make sure that the current methods that we use will work if we are fully remote. We had to come up with a plan and show how we reached out to our non-English speaking families and some of the forms that we did that. Some of them included personal phone calls and messages from teachers and principals, engaging them in the surveys, engaging them in our parent focus groups. We passed out flyers at lunch, at meal distribution. We sent emails and texts and robocalls and every method of communication we could think of to reach all of our families, but specifically targeting our non-English speaking families. One of the things that we had to do quite quickly was figure out how to meet the technology needs of our students if we were fully remote. And the Yakima School District had been planning for a while to move it to a one-to-one district, which means every student has a device of their own. And we weren't there quite yet. We had enough devices, but they were not yet checked out to students. They were on cards or in a classroom on a shelf the students would use in the classroom. So during the middle of the pandemic, we switched to be a one-to-one device where we passed out devices for every student. We passed out a couple thousand hotspots for families that required internet access. And we're currently in the process of creating an infrastructure to cover the entire school district with Wi-Fi connectivity. So any student in the school district, no matter where they are within our boundaries, when they open their Yakima School District device, it'll automatically log them in online into our network. And we needed to create a professional development plan for our educators as part of this OSPI plan. And so we surveyed staff and principals to identify what are their immediate needs. That way we could identify where we need to target the majority of our efforts the fastest, whether it be at the basic level of some of the platforms we use or intermediate or more advanced level. And then also site-specific surveys to tell how do we need to provide intentional learning at certain schools around certain platforms, because some schools might be more advanced than others. And then one thing that we did right off the bat was we identified what we call our Yakima School District Core 4, where we identified the 4 main platforms that we use for our online learning. One is how do we store and share data. One is how do we connect with students. One is do we share videos and create videos. And the other one is a communication platform. And so except for one platform, the two levels, secondary and elementary, are similar. At the elementary level, we use Google Classroom as their learning management system. That's basically our digital classroom platform. And at 6th through 12th grade, we use Canvas. We had to create a 4-stage reopening plan. And we were very careful to choose our wording here because we did not want to use the term phases, because the state and the health department, local health officials use the term phases. We're in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And these phases, these stages that we were asked to create are not aligned with the state's health department phases, because what we do see happening across the country and across other states, across other countries, is they might move from phase 1 to phase 2, but then they quickly see either a regression in some areas or happen to backpedal a little bit. And the worst thing that we can do as a school district is to move to the next stage only to have to go backwards a stage. That would be very, not only challenging for our students, but for our families and our staff members as well. And so our stages are identified in such a way that once we know that the county that we're in or the health officials give us the go-ahead to move to the next stage, we want to make sure that the data shows and the trending data shows for the COVID-19 that we do not have to run the risk of going backwards. So our stage A is where we currently are, and we currently where we ended the school year. All pre-K-12 learning is fully remote. However, if the health department allows, we will be able to provide in-person instruction for students with special needs and circumstances and other identified subgroups. We anticipate this week that we will hear from the state or local health officials about what they will allow for our school to start for next year, whether we'll be able to bring students in full, whether we'll be able to bring some groups of students in, or whether we will be fully remote. And so we are in a holding pattern, and we won't know which stage we will be in until we hear from the health department. Stage 2 is kind of a hybrid model. We'll basically have 3 different components going on. The first one is there will be a hybrid group where some students will go to school Monday, Tuesday, and then they'll do remote learning Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The other half of the students will go to school Thursday, Friday, and do remote learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We will still have the subgroups of students from stage A that we know need to be learning in person, and then we will continue that. And then families, no matter what stage we're in Yakima School District, whether they're kindergarten through 12th grade, will have the opportunity to participate in a fully online school. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. Stage 3 was where we can be back in school 100% of our students. However, extracurricular activities will resume in compliance with the district activities, limitations on crowd size and group size, activity size, and health protocols. But families can still choose to continue online learning in stage C. And then in stage D, everybody's back in school who wants to be back in school, and all extracurricular activities resume without restrictions, but families may choose to still continue on the online learning platform. And this slide right here lays out some of our online learning options. Now, I want to make sure there's a difference between when we talk about remote learning and online learning. When we go into school and we have students who are in a hybrid model, some students they'll be in school in person, and then the rest of the time they'll still have their same teacher. That teacher will just be providing them instruction and feedback while they're from home. So they'll still have their boundary school and their boundary school classroom and their boundary school peers. These Yakima online options are different. K through 5 students can remain enrolled in their boundary school, but they will attend a school online for part or all of the 2021 school year. They will have a Yakima School District teacher, but they will utilize a third-party online curriculum provider. Students will remain enrolled online for at least 1 semester or for the full year. This is a public school option without a fee to YSD parents, and attendance will be taken and grades will be issued. These students that enroll in the online option, the fully online option, they will be essentially working one-on-one with them and a teacher through a third-party curriculum provider. And the benefit of this is these students will not have to worry about a pacing guide. They can work at their own pace. They can work at a faster pace. They can access content to a grade level higher should they work through it fast enough. Whereas if the students who remain in our traditional hybrid model, they will continue with so let's say they're a 3rd grade teacher at MLK, they will continue with that 3rd grade teacher through the school year and their peers in anticipation of the school reopening, and then they will then pivot back to the full-time classroom instruction. Whereas students who are online will stay online for a full semester or a full year should they choose. And as we've always done so, we will continue to offer our Yakima online through 6 through 12 students. And then juniors and seniors who are interested can enroll in Running Start and begin completing their college courses through Yakima Valley College. And also our YV Tech program will continue to operate, whether fully online or partially in person or fully in person. Part of our plan required us to identify protocols and procedures for the health and safety of our students and staff. And so one of the requirements right now is that we have a daily family attestation where parents who, when they send students to school, they will, and we haven't yet received this final guidance from the district, from the OSPI to see what this will look like. But they will need to fill out a form, whether it be on an app or on our school websites, or either a paper pencil form to send to school, saying that their student has met a specific level of health requirements and their parents are attesting that the student is not sick when they send them to school. This will happen prior to getting on the bus or prior to dropping off at school. Part of our plan had to identify transportation protocols for how are we going to keep students physically distancing for as long as possible on the bus. For example, we know that some students will get on the bus and they'll ride the bus the whole route. Some students will only be on the bus the last portion of the bus before it arrives at school. So students who are on first, they may go to the very back of the bus, and then the students that come on next will then sit social distancing separated from them. So we will have the windows down and follow the protocols as much as possible to keep these students as far apart for as long as possible on the bus. The state and our department and our Office of Public Instruction has identified that in order for any of these plans to work, whether it be partially in person or fully in person, it would not be possible if we had to practice 100% social distancing on the bus. And so that is why they provided some leniency there, as long as we're following protocols and students are wearing their masks. We also had to create model classrooms for physical distancing, where we know that a 6-foot buffer around every student means we need 36 square feet per student in the classroom. And so when you have a chance, you'll be able to click on these 2 videos, one from Barge Lincoln and one at Hoover Elementary, where you can see what a classroom might look like with students sitting social distancing, or even with students sitting with some clear dividers in between them, so to minimize the flow of germs and particles. As always, we have hand washing protocols, but those will be ramped up, and we will have a much more rigorous hand washing protocol and a sanitation protocol. We were tasked with providing sanitation protocols not only for inside the school, but for outside as well, for any areas or play areas the students may be touching. Part of our nutrition and food service plan is our nutrition director and her team needed to create plans for what will we do for each one of the stages. Whether we're fully remote, we'll continue to deliver food to students as we had over the summer, or if we're partially in person, how do we deliver for some of the students who aren't here and some of the students who are here? And then for those students who are here, how do we deliver food to them in a way that minimizes their contact, their need to be in a close proximity, and minimize the touch? And so most often students will get grab and go bags when they're in school and they'll be delivered either to their classroom or right outside their doors to minimize students walking and passing each other in the hallway. We've been required to provide cloth masks for all of our staff, and it has been required that students wear masks or face coverings, such as a face shield, when they're in building. And so we've had to create protocols and plans for how do we support that. What do we do for those students who show up and forgot a mask, or their parents couldn't provide them with one for that day, or they're running around at recess and they fell in a mud puddle? You know how 3rd graders are. So we have contingency plans for all of those, but what the state has been very clear about is if a student or staff or anybody is in the building during some of these phases, face masks are required. We don't have any control over determining whether they are or not required. The last component is we had to create a flow chart to allow us to follow and track and to provide case investigation for our possible potential exposures. And so the state and our health department has come out and defined some of the key components. For example, casual contact is defined as being in the same building or area, but not meeting the criteria as close contact. Close contact or exposure it's with somebody with a positive COVID-19 or symptomatic presumed potential household member, intimate partner, or caregiver, where you have been less than 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer with that person. So that's their definition of exposure or close contact. And so we have a flow chart for whether you've been in close contact or casual contact with somebody who has been confirmed or presumed positive for COVID-19. And then we follow this protocol. And the health department has issued a protocol for us where when we have a suspected exposure or close contact, the health department, our local health district, will send somebody to the school and work with that building's case investigator to determine what our next steps are and what our level of exposure is. And then finally, we are required to talk about what the learning looks like in the buildings. And this has probably been the trickiest component because we don't yet know what model we're going to be allowed to be in. Obviously, our preference is to have students in school, but we also know that the health department, the health district, and the state determine whether we can have students in school or not. So we needed to accommodate meet a specific number of hours every year, and this year is no different. And so we had to create a calendar that showed we meet 180 instructional days and the instructional hours. We had to create a typical weekly schedule, which this one included here is a fairly generic one. We are currently actually working on one for elementary school, middle school, and high school to help alleviate some of the pressure for our older students who may have to support and provide services for their younger siblings. Also, we know that on Wednesdays or whatever day of the week it's determined next year, if students are fully remote and need to go to meal distribution sites, we need to make sure we accommodate that in our schedule so students aren't missing classroom instruction and live classroom time because they have to go be in person to pick up their meals. We have to take attendance every day for our students. And OSPI is still drafting guidance on that. The last conversation we had with them, they were actually asking the districts across the state if we had any suggestions on what that would look like. So that's still a fairly fluid process, but we know that regardless of whether we have students in person, partially in person, or fully remote, we need students to be learning and we need to be accountable, and they need to be accountable for showing up every day. As a state and as a country, most of the states across the country have identified Common Core state standards. Washington, we call those the Washington Essential Learning Standards. And there are a set of standards that we know students need to master in order to move on to the next grade. And there are a lot of standards per grade level. And I like to refer to them as the nice to know standards and the need to know standards. Wow. And so what we've had to do is identify our priority standards, those need to know standards that we can, where if we promise a student guarantee that they have met expectations for that standard, they'll be successful at the next grade level. And this will really help those teachers who are in remote learning because they won't have to focus as much on the width of the standards, but they can go a lot deeper in those priority standards that have been identified. And lastly, we had to determine what our grading process, our grading procedure will look like for students, whether we're fully remote or partially in person. And last year, our grading, we adopted a grading policy of A, B, C, D, or incomplete. And so that's our current grading policy moving forward this year, is we want students to be engaged and online and learning, and we don't want the grades to be a hiccup for getting students the knowledge and learning that they need. And so that in a nutshell is a culmination of thousands of hours of work performed by many teachers, students, parents, and very grateful for and thankful for the work that they put in helping put forth this work. And as I said, this plan will be posted to the school website shortly after our school board adopts this plan. And then components of this plan we'll be able to start to mobilize this plan once we get confirmation from our health district about what we'll be able to do as far as who and how we can have students in building. President Navarro.
Thank you, Dr. Darlene. Appreciate the presentation. I do want to make a note. I noticed that there's quite a few comments in the comment section of this meeting. The board initially hadn't planned on taking or processing questions. So I know Superintendent Green has suggested that those with questions regarding this plan should contact Dr. Darling. Is that right, Trevor?
Yes, that would be the best way of doing it,
Yes.
considering we have over 200 people in this
Yes.
meeting. We'd be happy to publish those responses, perhaps in one of our Q&A would be the best way.
Yes, thank you. So we'll ask that those who are attending or are joining us today, if you have questions, and those that have been posted on in the comment section, that you contact Dr. Darling directly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions or comments from board members.
Raymond?
Yes, Martha?
I want to congratulate Dr. Darling and his cast of thousands who put together this plan. The fact that we were able to pull together this plan on somewhat short notice, and have the degree of input that we had from our staff, from our students, from our families, from community members is it's truly remarkable. And I think the level of effort that everyone put in is really reflective of the quality of the plan. I don't anticipate that the health department is going to make a decision for anything less than virtual. I don't know of any county health department that has done that in the state yet. And so I would be very surprised if there was anything but virtual in the directive from the health department. But I wondered if there was discussion about the length of time that we're looking at for this type of instructional year that we may start out with. And maybe it's too early for that discussion. I don't know, but it's just a question that I had. Back to you.
I could respond to that, Raymond, if that's okay.
Yes. Please.
So thank you, Martha. I too commend Dr. Darling, the effort that went forth. And I just want to call out to those in attendance that when you have access to this document, you'll be able to go through all of those links and kind of just delve more fully in and see all of the preparation that has gone into it. Regarding your question, Martha, and the comment about our health districts, I too would be gobsmacked, amazed, astounded if they were to say anything else aside from virtual learning. Regarding the length of time, what we have heard from the health district is they are talking in the terms when nothing official, of course, but we'll hear things like until the COVID infection rate gets down, and they'll say we're looking at possibly months. So they're not giving an exact time frame, but they are not talking in days or weeks. They're talking in longer terms. But we are supposed to receive some type of direction from them as early as tomorrow and probably as late as Wednesday.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I might have missed. Did you answer a question, or Trevor or Dr. Darling, in terms of how long we anticipate going with the distance and online learning, teaching and learning?
So I was responding to any health district recommendation. We've had some of those conversations internally, but as far as the health district, we have not had a definitive response as of length of time.
Okay, so I think part one of her question was in regards to, I'm thinking you're referring to whether we start like on a quarter, we start the first quarter online, or remote teaching and learning, or do we go a semester, or do we go the full year, or just, so I think the question that's been posed is how long do we anticipate this approach?
So we have not made any official decision as of yet. We are seeing some of those decisions being made in the Seattle and Vancouver, Spokane areas. The recommendation, if we were to go virtual again, looking like it will be that decision here relatively soon. My recommendation and the team's recommendation would be that we go for 9 weeks. That would be basically a quarter. Our semesters are 18 weeks. We want to make sure that we are giving a clear opportunity or clear direction to our families and to our our staff within the district of a length of time. It's difficult to always be flip-flopping back and forth and not have something to plan for. So the recommendation that if we do go virtual, that we look at a 9-week quarter period for the first announcement.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members?
I did see Graciela posted a question in the chat box, and she asked, was the parent survey available in Spanish? Yes, it was. Every survey we've sent out, and even Dr. Green recorded a video in English and in Spanish when he sent out those surveys.
Any other board members?
This is Graciela. I have an additional comment. So certainly appreciate all of the work. It's clear that thousands of hours went into the creation of the plan, and certainly appreciate all of the input that was sought during the creation of the plan. It's very comprehensive, inclusive of a lot of different groups, and so I really appreciate that. I think just also want to comment that with the pandemic and so many things still being in the air, I think we're going to need a lot of grace as a district throughout the coming year. Things can change day to day. We don't know what's going to happen. Things can change very quickly. And so just want everyone to be considerate of this very unique time in history. And the amount of changes that as a district we'll have to make and that we have made. And again, just being mindful that we do need to be graceful with each other to get through this next year. Well done, Dr. Darling and your entire group. It's a great plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graciela. Reverend Davis, do you have any remarks or questions?
I just want to say I'm very impressed. I read through the documents and stuff that Dr. Darling has placed before us, and I too agree with Graciela. We need some grace because there in Georgia they opened up, and 260 teachers has contracted COVID-19. 260 in one build in the district. That's a large district right outside of Los Angeles. And I think we should follow what the health department says. And if we have to do it semester by semester, quarter by quarter, through the whole year, then so be it. Because I'd rather caution on the side of safety than to just open up and then we have a big flood of sick people and students. So Dr. Darling, thank you for the great work. I'm enjoying watching your stuff unfold as I look through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Davis. How about Norm? Did you have any questions or comments to make?
No, I'd also just like to compliment Dr. Darling and the team of people that contributed to all that work. And I too have read through most of it. I haven't hit on all the links yet, but there's a tremendous amount of work going into that, and I deeply appreciate that.
I do have a question following up on Martha's question in terms of how long we plan to implement this stage. And I'm leaning more towards the semester. It just provides more time for planning, provide some stability. And, if things change tomorrow, then that turnaround, that transition, I don't know about that transition. It might cause just a lot of headache, heartache, and so forth. So I'm just wondering what the board is thinking in regards to the 9 weeks versus the quarter versus the semester approach.
I'm with you, Raymond, on that. I lean more toward a semester than a quarter, just because of the public behavior in our community so far has not encouraged me about people taking this whole thing seriously. And also recent research shows that even though young children don't necessarily get very ill from COVID-19, they do seem to be carriers. And so when we think of the number of families we have that are multi-generational families, we think of the number of families we have that are people that are, quote, essential workers, unquote. So if they are working, so if we have kids, we know how quickly colds and flu spread when school starts. You can almost count on getting a cold in October. And so I'm really kind of leaning more toward the idea of committing to one full semester and then see where we are. That's just my opinion.
Any other thoughts?
This is Graciela. I don't have a specific preference. I guess I would just look to the health department and, if there's CDC guidance that kind of outlines what the best practice is, I'd suggest that we follow the guidelines from the health experts.
I would agree with Graciela. It might be difficult to make the decision on a quarterly basis since the first quarter ends sometime in November, and it might be just the beginning of flu season in addition to the pandemic situation. But I know that the health department doesn't necessarily think in terms of quarter, semester, trimester, but I think we could take their recommendations and convert them into our language and look at adjusting our plan as necessary. I would be very surprised if their recommendations would be anything less than, 3 or 4 months, simply because the vaccine probably won't be out until that point anyway.
Yes. So you're saying let's wait until the guidance comes from the Yakima County Health Department and then figuring out the length of time there, or you'll be comfortable with that?
I think I would, but they will. I'm confident that they will err on the side of caution and safety, and I would be surprised if they would say anything less than much more before the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Reverend Davis?
Yes. I'm one that feels that I would do the distant learning for the entire year and follow and make adjustments as the Department of Health suggests, because we never know, but still have the in-person piece in place where we can work it. If they say in 6 months we can have in person, because the rate that is going in Yakima County with the infection rate and seeing people not following the guidelines, I don't see it opening in 3 months or 4 months.
Yes.
And I think we could do the learning, online learning for the entire year, and then just make amendments once the health department says, let's you could do in person, and then have it at maybe 15, and then as it goes. I think that would be the smartest way to do it, because now you have enough wiggle room where you can make those adjustments.
Yes.
So that's what I see.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the board before we take action? Seeing none. Yes.
I'm wondering if the superintendent wants to weigh in here.
Sure.
Thank you, Martha. I kind of did at the beginning when I talked about a term. It's really, you can always, if we were to go a 9-week period, after 6 weeks, we would reassess, make an announcement for the next 9 weeks, and we could go ahead and progress that way. I think the opportunity to allow the health department to make decisions and adjustments based on the data is something that's important. And I can tell you that the health department is not going to be able to give us information about whether we should close for a year or whether we should close for a semester. So hence going a term of 9 weeks does allow for that flexibility of always, adding time and keeping the community informed. That would just, it's really going to be determined by our health district anyway, because we are not going to be able to go back into in-school school, so to speak, without their permission and their blessing. So I do understand the perspective of the board. Just wanted to provide another alternative perspective.
Thank you, Trevor.
Mhm.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Just one more question.
Sure.
Does the plan, does OSPI require that our plan identify a specific length of time that we would, for instance, if we're going to go virtual, that we would have to be virtual a specific length of time?
They did not articulate anything of that nature. What we have decided, though, for our parents who elect to go to our fully remote online learning, they commit for a semester just because of the pacing and scope and sequence of using that third-party curriculum. It would be difficult for those students to leave that partway through. So we as a district have identified that if they do our fully online learning model, they commit to at least a semester, but the OSPI has not come out with any guidance.
So if they don't require it, we don't necessarily need to put it in the plan?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That may be the safest way to go.
Yeah, we'll be intentionally vague.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, at this time, I would entertain a motion that the board approves resolution 09.19.20 reopening plan.
So move.
Moved by Reverend Davis,
Second.
seconded by Martha. Discussion?
This plan will be available broadly to parents and families, staff, and community, correct?
That's correct. I believe it'll be put on the website either tonight or tomorrow, and there'll be a Cliff Notes version that parents can click through, or they can actually click on this actual document and view each of the live links.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at discussion. Any other discussion? I did want to make a few remarks. I just wanted to say that I know that the board, and I'm speaking on my behalf, that we understand that the district faculty, staff, and administrators continue to face challenges. This has been a challenge since we had to go online last year, and it's going to be challenges as board members indicated to reopening our schools this fall. And even if we were going to go full in-person, live in person, there was still going to be a lot of challenges. But as Norm alluded to, the COVID-19, the virus and so forth is just not getting it. The situation is not getting better in Eastern Washington. In fact, we've seen fewer individuals that are testing positive, but we're still at a high rate. So I don't see this, as Norm mentioned, ending anytime soon. This virus has had a great impact on many of our friends and family. I'm sure we all personally know individuals that have unfortunately passed away due to COVID-19. It's a terrible thing that it's really impacting our community, and our family and our friends. And so what I'm hearing is that, the priority of the board is not only providing a quality education to all our students, to continue to do that. And we thank you, Dr. Darling, for the great work that you led to this point. But we also, I'm hearing that the board is really concerned about the health and safety of everyone involved. And so I do support this plan, the way it's written. It outlines an approach for providing a quality education, online, distance learning, teaching and learning, and at the same time, keeping everyone safe and healthy. So, and again, my last plug is I do really support the semester approach in terms of committing to do that. So, any other discussion?
Well, just one more comment.
Sure.
One of the things I really like in the plan is for those that are really nervous that even if things get better, they still don't want their kids in school unless a vaccine is available, that we do have online available throughout the year, even if we are phased into a hybrid plan at some point, that parents that aren't comfortable with that still have the option of full-time online at home, and that service is available to them. And I'm really pleased with that.
Thank you. So if there's no other comments, Jennifer, please conduct roll call vote.
Donald Davis Jr.,
Yes.
Graciela Villanueva,
Yes.
Martha Rice,
Yes.
Raymond Navarro Jr.,
Yes.
Norm Walker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes. So I do want to thank again, Dr. Darling, for your leadership. I want to thank all those that were involved, all the various groups, the Distance Learning Steering Committee, the Reopening Schools work groups, the parent focus groups, YEA leadership who participated in the process as well. So we want to thank everybody that was involved. Again, Dr. Darling, thank you for your leadership and spearheading the development of this plan. It wasn't an easy task considering the guidelines from OSPI were about 58 pages. So we thank you for that. Trevor, do you have any concluding remarks?
I just want to thank the board for your wonderful insight and acknowledgement. I especially appreciated Graciela, you calling for grace at a time where grace is needed. And I would just point out that that has really been the theme of this entire preparatory part of organizing the plan and switching to distance learning. So not only are we seeking grace as a district, we are looking to always provide grace for those who are facing circumstances that are very difficult at this time in our society. So I appreciate that, not only as a one-way message, but I believe that that is something we should continue to practice right now in our city and throughout our state. So thank you for all of your comments. Again, thank you to all of those of you who have stayed online to view this plan and participated in the creation of it. And for Dr. Darling and his team for making sure that we have what I believe is one of the most solid plans that I have seen regarding preparation for the multiple different contingencies that could come forward over the next year. So thank you, and thank you, board.
Thank you, Trevor. I also want to thank all those that are attending today for your comments. Please follow up with Dr. Darling if you hadn't gotten or received the answer to your question. So thank you for your continued support. And again, for those who participated in the planning process, thank you for that as well. So again, thank you, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next item. It's an informational item. And we do have a public hearing, which would be to adopt the 2020-21 Yakima School District budget. So in accordance with RCW 28A.505.060, the Yakima School District Board of Directors is required to hold a public hearing on the 2020-21 budget. This hearing will provide an opportunity for public input on the proposed budget. Any person may attend this virtual meeting and be heard for or against any part of the budget and are able to do so through one of the three processes. So thank you to Jennifer. She helped in setting the first two options up, and we'll process the third option. But option one was that prior to the meeting, today's meeting, that individuals from the community were able to go to the district website and use a Let's Talk contact form and complete that with any of their comments or questions. And that was due by July 28th. Option two was prior to this public meeting or public hearing, that written public comments could be mailed or hand delivered to the Yakima School District headquarters. So, and then the third option, which we'll be conducting today, is individuals from the community will be able to dial in or link onto the board docs to provide comments during this period. So, but before we open our public hearing or hearing to public comments, the board will be presented with a proposed 2020-21 budget. Trevor, would you like to provide opening remarks and get this presentation kicked off?
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you. Thank you, Raymond, and thank you, members of the board. Becky, I trust that you are preparing us to pull up the presentation. I would actually just call out that I'm very excited for Becky to help present today and kind of lead the presentation. I will be joining her. Becky Neeson has been in our district for quite a long time, and she is our new interim executive director of finance. So this is her first opportunity to present to the board. So please be nice, be gentle, but also be firm, because there is probably, I don't know how important we view the budget, but it is of paramount importance to the work that we need to do as a district. So while she's preparing, I would just ultimately here at the end add that we are now down to 144 viewers. So we are separating the JV from the varsity to see who is going to stick with us as a board to review the budget here. So Becky, are you out there? Are you ready?
I'm out here. I'm getting ready here.
All right, I'm just stalling as long as I can here. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I'm trying to present.
Yeah, well, she's pulling that up, and I think we'll see her screen take over. Just want to remind the board and those who are observing that we did have a preliminary review of the presentation in June. Quite a bit has changed, and Becky has been able to scour the budget and work in collaboration with some other individuals to make sure that we have a budget that we can really stand behind and believe is very indicative and reflective of where we are in our current status and moving forward. So with that, Becky, it looks like you're ready to go.
All right, so you're seeing my screen.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you, Superintendent Green, Chairman Navarro, and members of the board. I'm very pleased to present an executive overview and analysis of the proposed 2020-21 budget. I do want to let you know that all advertising has been done according to the RCW and legal requirements, and copies of the preliminary budget were made available to the public by July 10th. We received no comments at the district since the preliminary presentation on June 29th. So this slide that you're seeing is the 2020-21 budget overview of all of the funds. I'm going to be focusing in on the general fund, which is the first column. But just so you know, going across the ASB fund, that is where the resources and expenditures for our student fundraising is contained. Our debt services fund, moving over a column, is for servicing of our long-term debt. Capital projects fund is for major construction and land acquisition. And then our transportation vehicle fund is for purchasing of buses. So just as a reminder, in our general fund, we do all of our programs, basic ed, food service, maintenance, and our student transportation. So as you look down, going down for general fund, our beginning fund balance, we're projected to start out with 26 million. We're still thinking that is where we will be. We will have total revenue and other funding or other financing sources in the amount of 247 million. You do see the expenditures there of 254 million. And then a transfer out to other funds, and that transfer is to service our non-voted debt and debt service fund. So that's where those funds will be going. The current balance, just as a note, for the non-voted debt is 5.4 or 5.5 million. So then you see below that the 7.8 deficit for our general fund. That's our planned amount. Part of that is the continued gap in revenue for special education. You guys have seen over the years. That continues to be something we're watching and trying to hopefully get some additional funding out of the state and federal government. So then you see the calculated ending fund balance of 18.1 million. We also have capacity built into that 7.8 for some of the plans for spending. We don't anticipate ending up with 18 million. We anticipate being more in the low 20s. And just keep in mind that we do have, when you're budgeting, you have some capacity in there for all the planned things that could happen. So we'll pause there for any questions that you might have. All right. Okay. This slide is new in the analysis of the budget, so please stop me along the way if you have questions. But what I want to show you and what's important about this slide is that for general fund for the 2020-21, the changes to revenues and expenditures that we will be in balance with the new revenues we're anticipating versus the new programs that we're implementing. So keep in mind that this is compared back to 1920 budget. Again, you see the beginning fund balance there of 26 million. Now under the state revenue increases and decreases, we have K-3 class size reduction. Currently, we're at 21.18, and the district is committed to moving that down to 20.11. So that will increase our revenues by about $1.3 million. For the general apportionment and the second line, bilingual, highly capable, and learning assistance program, you see the increases there of 1.8 million and then 675,000. And that's due mainly to the salary and benefit increases that we received from the legislative session. And as a reminder, that increase was a 1.6% on the salary. We did get a bump in special education at 2.4 million. The legislators increased they went to a two-tiered model for funding, and because we have more kids in our basic ed classes, we get a little bump in the amount of funding per student by 0.0075. The transportation, unfortunately, the governor vetoed the hold harmless agreement, or the hold harmless, and we were bumped back to our 18-19 actuals, less some carryover that we had in that year. So you do see a slight decrease of 468,000. Local effort assistance, an increase of 341,000. And then professional learning days. So they funded an additional professional learning day for our certificated staff And that gives us an extra $1 million. And those professional learning days are handled through our teaching and learning department. So total state revenue going up 7.2 million. And then we have our local levy revenue increase. And keep in mind, this is just for the fiscal year increase of 3.5 million. And so thank you to our voters and our board. We're very happy to receive that additional revenue. So total state and local levy revenue of 10.7. Then for our expenditure increases or different programmatic changes, in order to reduce the class size, we need to hire 12 certificated staff for K-3 grades. And that's going to cost about 1.3 million. We're also, and again, this is a comparison from 1920 to 2021, hiring 21 certificated staff district-wide for different programmatic changes throughout the buildings. And that's going to cost about $2.4 million. And then hiring 15 building custodial staff, which is $1 million. And that is the strategy for maintaining our buildings. General wage increases, negotiated increases, and hiring 13 staff across all other groups, 6.9 million. And we're also recognizing some savings due to different items that the district has put in place. We hired chief legal counsel, so we're seeing a savings in our outside legal costs. The E-rate program was also changed, so our technology department has recognized some savings for that program. And then we also have utility savings that we're recognizing due to a great job by our maintenance department of replacing outdated HVAC systems. And that total savings that we identified is about $1.6 million. You can see that our expenditures will be about 10.1, and that would be an increase to our fund balance of $580,000. I'll pause here for any questions.
Hi, this is Graciela. I do have a question. Becky, can you help me understand, on the previous slide, you showed an ending fund balance of 18, and then on this slide that you just reviewed, you're showing an increase of $500,000 to the fund balance. So can you help me understand how that is?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. So this is just compared back to our 2019-20 budget to 2021, and it's just for the new revenues and expenditures that we're putting in place. So what this slide is intending to show you is that due to the new revenues that we got, we're not exceeding those in new programs that we've put in place. And the previous slide, this one with the deficit of 7.8, is the overall arching general fund budget, and that 7.8 million consists of the out of balance condition for special education services, which we continue to have about $3 million that for running our program that we currently are not funded for from state or federal identified special ed revenues. And then we also have built into that 7.8 some capacity for other things that could happen. For example, sick leave cash out, vacation cash outs, things like that that we need to plan for, and grant spending. Does that answer your question?
Okay, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this slide? I know this is a new way of looking at it, so I want to make sure that everybody understands and doesn't leave without having their questions answered.
Becky?
Yes.
I appreciate the breakdown that you've given us. It's very helpful when considering what's different from last year to this year. And that level of detail really helps me when I look at when I'm looking at the two budgets and trying to compare the two different budgets, and to have this breakdown is really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Any additional questions before we move on? Okay. So another analysis for the district's 2021 budget is to do what's called a SWOT analysis. And Superintendent Green, I'll invite you to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Becky. I appreciate, again, just as was mentioned, you taking the time to break this out for us and point out all of the important information and changes. As Becky was talking about, we have conducted a SWOT analysis, so that is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I will take you, the board, through the first three, and then Becky will follow up with the threats. So if you look on this page, you can see, obviously, we have the local increase that was referenced earlier of LEA revenue, levy equalization. So we'll be bringing in an additional 3.5 million. Again, thank you to the community and the board of directors. That is something that we really were able to leverage during this COVID situation and the ongoing pandemic. So we know that that is going to be something that is continued to be needed. So having that increase is very important, and that definitely is a strength. In addition, we find ourselves at 82% of our salary of our finances go to our salary and benefits. That is within the industry standards. So we're doing a good job there, recognizing between typically 80 and 85% of the budget does go to personnel. Aside from that, we have an adequate fund balance currently and do anticipate meeting the board policy 1000.2.3, which is a definite bonus. And we already have predictable labor costs figured out with the negotiated contracts that were achieved through our HR department. Credit to Anthony Murrieta, his team, and then the teams that he bargained with as well. So those are definite strengths we see going into the 2021 budget. As far as weaknesses, we recognize that we have large maintenance projects that are out there that are pending. We have deferred maintenance during times where we had funding issues, and we know those need to be addressed. Unfortunately, we have no capital projects funding category, so everything does come out of the general fund, which that is concerning, and that is something that will provide an opportunity that I'll address momentarily. The other weakness that we find is the continued gap in revenue for special education. Of course, you as a board are aware of the funding issues regarding special education and not being fully funded, and that is something that we do have to make up. And I'm happy to say, though, we are a beacon of service to our community in the special education area. So even though that is a weakness, we know that many people are looking to us and want to be a part of the Yakima School District because of our services. Looking for the opportunities, I mentioned the challenge that we have with our maintenance projects. The opportunity that exists for us is to engage in a future capital levy that would designate appropriate funds fully to the area of maintenance and making sure that we are keeping our different buildings up to date and making sure that our students are benefiting from that opportunity to have the best buildings available. So that is an opportunity that exists for us, is that future capital levy possibility. I'll now kick it back over to Becky. Would you continue, please, with the threats?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Green. Threats. So we have a dependence on the local effort assistance in our budget. Currently, we receive $16.8 million in the 2021 budget. So this is an area that, as you were talking to the legislators, because there is also the threat that they're going to come back into special session, this is considered non-BEA funds. And so it is on their list to look at. So as a reminder, the LEA money is can be a political issue. Poverty poor districts receive LEA funds, and so as you're talking to our legislators, this will give you a little bit of background on that. Hopefully they look at other places to cut and not that. COVID-19, of course, is one of our threats. While we did receive CARES funding in the amount of $6.4 million, and we continue to pursue the FEMA reimbursement for our safety and PPE and cleaning items. As long as this goes on, it will cost us even more funds. So maybe the federal government will come through with some more CARES money with that. An additional threat is our enrollment fluctuations. And then again, with the legislative special session, they have an $8 billion shortfall that they need to address over the next biennium and including at the end of this year. Are there questions about the threats or any of the SWOT items?
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Could you advance the next slide? And I'll go ahead and thank you. So members of the board, community, I would just like to share some of the community investments, some of the investments, district investments for 2021. We have decided to invest in an executive director of equity partnerships and student engagement. As you certainly know, we spent a good chunk of the year engaging our community and developing a strategic plan of which we are very proud. And we are doing significant equity work and finalizing our equity policy and addressing our procedures. So having an executive director of equity partnerships and student engagement is part of the strategy to make sure that we are fulfilling our commitment to the community as laid out in the strategic planning process. And we're very excited to have Dr. Marcus Pimpleton, who is with us here today, on board and part of the Yakima School District. In addition, we are engaged in something which I'm very excited to always talk about, which is Project Gemini. Our Director of Technology, Andy Gonzalez, and his vision of making sure that we have a way of serving our entire community in the form of having internet online access throughout the district has been very well received. We have multiple partnerships throughout the community. He has been working very hard over the last 2 months, and we are very hopeful that we will be able to make an official announcement, hopefully in mid-September, that we do have full coverage and free coverage for internet for all of our district students. And district staff as well, for that matter. So that's something that's very exciting, and it's something that really does engage in that area, fulfill that promise of digital equity in moving to a one-to-one device model. Of course, one-to-one devices are only useful, and of course a distance learning model is only useful if we have the internet access throughout our entire district. So again, a phenomenal investment, and one for which I am very grateful for you as a board, our community, and of course the work of our staff. The third bullet references our teaching and learning focus. So we've had the implementation of a district-wide 6 through 12 math alignment and instruction. So we are focusing on that this year, and also gearing up for a dual language approach. So our students will begin dual language classrooms, knock on wood, in 2021 if we're able to then get back to school and engage in that process. So again, that does fulfill our promise as laid out in our community-driven strategic plan. If we look at the fourth bullet, you can see the K3 ratio. So class size reduction going from 21.18 to 20.11 is a commitment that we're making also. And then I will wrap this up by addressing the safety and security area of additional custodial staff, which was referenced previously previously, making sure that we can adequately take care of our facilities. Even in this downtime, it does give us an opportunity to get ahead of not only our maintenance projects, but keeping our buildings clean and our grounds clean. But of course, our custodial staff is that addition that I'm referencing right now. And lastly, the safety precautions for COVID-19. We do know that we will be able to receive funding through the CARES Act, but also we know that all of those expenditures may exceed what is being allocated from the federal level. So those are the investments of which I want you to be aware going into the 2020-21 school year. Do we have any questions at this time over the investments or on the investments?
Trevor,
Wonderful. Oh, yes, Martha.
sorry, I'm just a little late getting my mouse over to the microphone. I want to thank you for this forward look. I appreciate this particular, I mean, I like all the slides, but this particular one allows for not only board, but the staff and the community to see what direction we're headed with some of our big initiatives. And I also appreciate the fact that you're aligning so closely with the strategic plan. There are some items on this page that folks that participated in the strategic plan were pretty assertive about wanting to make sure that they were in there. So I like this kind of forward-looking piece that allows us to kind of keep our eyes on the prize, so to speak.
Thank you, Martha. Were you one of those assertive individuals?
Not I.
Okay.
Not I.
Yeah. Go ahead, Norm.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, finish up.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Well, no,
please.
I just I'm thrilled with the things I saw in terms of the budget, in terms of hiring the increased certificated staff, and also the K-3 class size reduction. One thing that occurs to me, assuming we do eventually get to have all our little bodies back in school, are we going to have space issues in K-3 in terms of having enough classrooms to put all those people in?
Dr. Darling, could you address that for us, please?
Yeah, so we anticipate a lot of this work being pushing in extra support or doing some shared or co-teaching models. We do not have a lot of extra empty classrooms, but the teachers that we do provide, they'll be providing some social emotional support, behavior intervention support, and if we use them specifically for K through 3, then that funding goes into the K through 3 class size funding calculations. Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for those questions. I do appreciate as well the calling out of the strategic plan again, Martha. And I look at our board and I know that each one of you were involved very much in the development of that process. So not only representing your certain area of our city, but also representing our district and our staff as well. And that combined with the great turnout that we had in developing that planning process has really given us direction and helped us to then determine where to allocate our funds to meet those requirements. So that is why it's so important to be able to have that direction and that map moving forward. So I appreciate your support throughout this process. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Becky.
All right, thank you. The last two slides here are going to be the 4-year forecast, which you guys have seen in the past. This is a legal requirement that we project forward 4 years and present that. This will be also part of the resolution that's brought forward. What I want you guys to know about this is that it holds little value in years 3 and 4. We do not take into consideration in here any programmatic changes that would happen out that far. This is a pretty straightforward projection. The levy revenue and the LEA revenue We can predict those to the best of our ability at this point. And then everything else is compound, or I use the IPD, which is the implicit price deflator, which this year is a 1.6%, and then just compound it forward. This is the general fund slide that has all 4 years, and then this slide has the other funds on it: ASB debt service, capital projects, transportation. And do any of you have questions about the 4-year forecast? Okay.
I have a question. I'm sorry, it took a while for my microphone to pop up here. So previously, in projections of student enrollment, I seem to recall that we were looking at possible, not huge amounts at a time, but we were looking at decline in enrollment in the district, and the projection doesn't take into account that we have been seeing a trend of some decline in enrollment. Do we know something different now, or do we have a plan B just in case that trend continues?
That's a great question, Norm. You see on this 4-year forecast that I left the enrollment stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year will be, as we move forward into this year, I think we're going to know more. And that's something that Superintendent Green and I will definitely be watching and bring forward as soon as we know anything different. At this point, I don't believe that the enrollment that we've seen a decline in that. I don't know if Dr. Darling has any numbers on that.
Well, I'd be happy to jump in. Norm, I greatly appreciate that comment, because that is something we have to look at. And early indications of what we were hearing had us very, very concerned. And even one of the surrounding districts had originally reported that they were concerned about a 10% enrollment reduction. Upon further analysis, they did determine that that was not the case, and quickly bumped up their projections to around a 1 or a 2% adjustment. There may be an adjustment. We will continue to monitor that and make sure that we are communicating that with the board. I know that Becky is certainly making a note right now, and that's something we can come back and we'll keep you appraised of as we see those numbers actually come in. So thank you for surfacing that.
Are there additional questions? Okay, I just want to remind you that we'll be bringing the resolution to the August 18th board meeting for final adoption of that resolution. And I want to thank you guys, the board, for your governance and fiduciary responsibility. And rest assured that Superintendent Green and I are going to work diligently and update you along the way as we know more throughout this year.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becky. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Director Navarro.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Becky. Appreciate the presentation. The board will now open this hearing for public input. Before we do that, I'd like to let the board know that the district did not receive any input through the Let's Talk option, nor did it receive any comments via email or anybody walking those in. So just wanted to mention that. For those who would like to speak before the board today, can do so by registering in the comment section of this meeting if possible. As a reminder, we ask that public comments are related only to the 2020-21 budget, no longer than 3 minutes, contain no derogatory comments, and do not include specific names of students or staff. And we also ask that you please introduce yourself by name and give your affiliations before your comments. We'll go ahead and start our public comments. Jennifer, did anyone sign up to speak?
John Kavanaugh has signed up to speak, and he's the only one that I have at this point.
Okay. Welcome, John, and you're on.
Good afternoon, John Kavanaugh, YA's new president, I guess. A couple of things I would have liked to see and that weren't in the budget. A breakdown of the CARES Act money, and I didn't see that anywhere in the budget, and how we're going to spend that roughly $5 million. And what savings we experienced with the closure last year, transportation and that kind of stuff that we did not spend money on. How is that being adjusted with this new budget? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your comments. Trevor, would he be able to speak to either yourself or Becky on those two questions?
Well, I can address his first one was, yeah, we did not have every breakdown or every component of the budget included. This was an overview. So although the CARES Act was referenced, that is not something that was included in its totality. So he is correct in that. As far as the other item that he mentioned, absolutely. He could email Becky and we can schedule a time where he can sit down and see what we can answer for him.
Okay, thank you. At this time, are there any other callers on this meeting that did not have the opportunity to sign in and to speak today or this afternoon? Just want to make sure that we include everybody and give everybody the opportunity to make any public comments today. So I'll wait a few more seconds. So one more time, just want to make sure that there's not any other callers that would like to give public input this afternoon. And Jennifer, we have no other callers or individuals that would like to speak before the board?
No one has indicated that.
Thank you. So this concludes our public hearing on the Yakima School District 2020-21 budget. As Becky mentioned, we'll go ahead and move forward in the process, in the developmental process. And again, the budget will be considered for adoption by the board at its business meeting on August 18, 2020. I'd like to thank you, Becky, for all the work, for your leadership in overseeing the development of the budget. And for stepping right into, yeah, that's a big applause for.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you stepped right in, and this was like one of your first responsibilities, right? Is to tackle the annual budget for the Yakima School District, which is a humongous thing. Yeah, it's an arduous task, and we thank you for stepping into that leadership role and for all your work.
Graciela, what was your statement prior? Giving grace? Could you make that statement again on behalf of me?
Absolutely. We all need to be graceful with Becky.
But Becky, you don't need any grace. You've done an awesome job. And we know you've been working hard on this budget for the last month and a half to 2 months. And it's no easy task to look at, the federal requirements, state requirements, and the local levy, and the list goes on, and to put that together. And as you heard, the board is very impressed with the document, in that it's not only a budget, but it's also a document that foresees the future, right? It outlines our priorities, and that outlines the vision of the district, of the board. So we thank you for that. Trevor, again, thank you as well for your leadership. And we know that with the new superintendent comes new ways of doing things, and that you can tell the board is really, really liking the new ways. So we appreciate that. Are there any final comments from board members?
All I want to say is that we were adamant about this going into the budget, everything, the planning of the strategic plan.
Yes.
Thank you for hearing us. And the
Yeah.
three of us, Martha, Norm, and I, we were very adamant, along with the others in there, to make sure that everything starts aligning and be transparent. And I want to thank you, Becky, for making it simple, where a layperson can read it and not be bewildered. Thank you so very much.
Yes, Trevor. Thank you, Reverend.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Davis. I just did in final comment, just wanted to thank John Kavanaugh as our new president of YEA for stepping up and asking a question this evening. I want to make sure that everyone here still in the audience does understand that our major goal with the budget is to make sure that we are engaging in an era of transparency. So the questions that he asked are important, and I didn't want that to be misinterpreted. I really do hope that John does follow up and have that conversation. And if there are any other community members out there that for whatever reason did not want to speak up, if they have questions about the budget, we would encourage you to reach out and contact anybody here at central office, and we'll direct you to Becky, and I would be able to join that myself as well, because it is so important for us to make sure that it is easy to understand, and that we are being proper stewards of the finances with which we're entrusted by the community. So I want to thank John for that, and thank Becky for her hard work and for your trust as a board. Thank you.
Job well done, Becky.
Raymond, you're talking, but we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you. So next on the agenda is reports from members of the board. Do we have any board members who would like to, who have any items this afternoon? Okay, not seeing any. Just want to make sure.
Raymond?
Yes, Martha.
Just a reminder to folks, the Thursday COVID update calls that WASDA is doing at noon are still ongoing. And there's still quite a bit of information that's shared on those calls that really has helped me as a board member navigate through this process. Also, on 2 weeks from today, there will be a virtual director area caucus for anyone who may be interested in or wishes to participate in the upcoming General Assembly in September. The process is not only going to be virtual instead of in person, but it's also a new configuration where we now are doing one General Assembly versus a Legislative Assembly in September and a Delegate Assembly in November. So there will be legislative positions as well as permanent positions that will be discussed. So on that, I think it's the 17th, there will be a virtual director area caucus meeting to discuss the new processes, talk about the new proposals and the new positions, and allow for any discussion about amendments that folks would want to suggest to those proposals or positions. Because we're going to be virtual at General Assembly, there will not be opportunity for any live amendments from the floor. So they will have to be proposed this month and then resolved and the handbook updated. The handbook is currently available electronically. We got an email about that last week. I think, the end of last week. So I would encourage you to sign up for the Director Area Caucus and be a part of that. It's from 5:30 to 7 on the 17th. And you can sign up at the YSD website. And that's it.
Thank you, Martha. Are there any other reports from board members? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on. Next, in accordance with RCW 42.31.10, there is a need for executive session for the purpose of discussing potential litigation for 30 minutes. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential litigation for 30 minutes.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
by Martha, second by Reverend Davis. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Is there a fourth aye? I may have missed it.
I think Graciela and I did a duet there
Same
for a
time,
minute.
yeah.
Graciela says aye.
Aye, okay. Against?
No, just one note. We just got an email from Jennifer saying that the time on that executive session is to start at 5:30. Did you want to move immediately to executive session or just log in at 5:30? She sent us a new link.
Jennifer, can we log on now?
Yeah, it's live now.
Okay.
May I ask for a 3-minute break?
Okay. We'll wait once everybody gets on. We'll let those folks who want to get on, and then we'll wait 3 minutes once we
Okay.
give people a chance to take a break. So thank you. So motion passes 5-0. We'll see you on the other link. Again, Jennifer has emailed you guys, everybody, a link. Just connect there. Remember at the conclusion of our executive session to return to this regular open session so we can adjourn our meeting. So with that, I want to thank everybody, if you don't return, for joining our meeting today, and we appreciate all the comments and participation in this meeting. So we'll go ahead and move on to executive session. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for all the work you do in support of the board and making these meetings happen. So we're back into open public session. This brings us to the end of our agenda for this afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm just really, I don't know, just excited about that budget presentation and how well that went. And I'm just excited about the vision going forward, right? The priorities. It's just made my day to see that, equity and, the strategic plan and all those things that we've talked about work so hard with our superintendent leadership team and our district staff and faculty. And it looks like it's all coming together despite this COVID-19 and pandemic and the health emergency that we're currently facing. But I know that as each month passes and as each day goes by, that the district is growing stronger and stronger. And I like, Trevor, how you're relying on the expertise of all your leaders, and that's awesome to see. And I don't want to name people now, but because I might leave somebody out, but it's just awesome to see all the expertise, all the people, all the folks, that are standing up and taking on this very difficult situation. And I know that there's going to be some challenges, and we're going to be tripping here and there, and there's going to be some complaints and so forth. And but I know that the district will persevere. And as Martha indicated, we get some good feedback already. And I know that the district, because of our superintendent and all those in support of him and that are on the team, because we have that vision, we have that foresight, and most of all, we have the best interest of not only our students and providing a quality education, we do have the best interest of all our faculty, staff, and administrators. So I just wanted to commend our superintendent, Trevor, and everybody that's been part of this this process. So I want to give board member just one last opportunity if they want to make any comments. If not, we'll go ahead and okay. So again, thank you for joining our meeting this evening, and have a great rest of your afternoon. It's still pretty warm out there, so enjoy the heat and you take care. Bye now.